Wilhelmina Foster stood in the dusty street of Tombstone, Arizona, staring at the crumbling two-story hotel that now belonged to her, wondering if her late uncle had loved her or cursed her when he left her this disaster in his will. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on her dark hair, already slick with perspiration beneath her practical traveling bonnet. It was July 1882, and the heat seemed to rise from the ground itself, shimmering in waves that made the buildings dance. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia to reach this God-forsaken place, and now that she stood before the Grand Desert Hotel, the name seemed like a cruel joke. There was nothing grand about it. The porch sagged on one side, several windows were cracked or missing entirely, and the paint had peeled away years ago, leaving weathered gray wood exposed to the elements. A tumbleweed rolled past her feet as if to punctuate the desolation. Wilhelmina was 23 years old, unmarried, and until 2 months ago had been working as a seamstress in her aunt's shop. Now she owned property in the Arizona Territory, though that ownership felt more like a burden than a blessing. She picked up her 2 traveling cases and climbed the creaking steps to the front door. The inside was no better than the exterior. Dust coated every surface, cobwebs hung in the corners, and the furniture looked like it had survived a war. The front desk was scarred and listing to one side, its ledger book lying open to entries from 1880. Her uncle had clearly given up on the place long before his death. "You must be Miss Foster." Wilhelmina spun around, her heart hammering. A woman stood in the doorway to what must have been the kitchen, wiping her hands on a stained apron. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair and a weathered face that spoke of hard years in the desert sun. "I am, and you are, Martha Henley. I was your uncle's cook and housekeeper, though there has not been much to cook or clean these past months. I stayed on hoping someone would come. The place has been empty since Edward passed in May." Wilhelmina set down her cases and removed her gloves, looking around with fresh despair. "How bad is it, truly?" The lawyer's letter said the hotel was operational but struggling. Martha let out a bitter laugh. "Struggling implies there is still fight left in it. Miss Foster, we have not had a paying guest in 4 months. The roof leaks in 6 rooms, the kitchen stove is cracked, the well water runs brown half the time, and your uncle owed money to half the merchants in town. The bank has been patient, but they will not wait forever on the mortgage payments." The weight of it settled on Wilhelmina's shoulders like a physical thing. She had known the situation was dire, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way the lawyer's careful letter had not. She had spent nearly all her savings on the journey west, banking on the hotel providing her livelihood. The alternative was returning to Philadelphia and admitting failure, living as a spinster dependent on her aunt's charity. "How much does the hotel owe?" Martha pulled a folded paper from her apron pocket. "I have been keeping accounts, $347 to various creditors. Another 6 months of mortgage payments are overdue, that is $210. The bank has threatened foreclosure." Wilhelmina's knees went weak. $557 might as well have been $5,000. She had $32 left to her name. "There must be something we can do. The building is sound, is it not? Just in need of repairs." "The bones are good," Martha admitted. "But it takes money to make money, and we have none. Your uncle tried to keep it going after his wife died, but his heart was not in it. He drank away what little profit there was." A sound from above made them both look up. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor of the 2nd story, followed by a crash and a string of creative profanity. "Who is that?" Wilhelmina demanded. Martha's expression turned uncomfortable. "That would be Percy Zimmerman. He has been staying in room 7 for the past 3 months. He keeps saying he will pay his back rent once his mining claim pays out, but so far nothing has come of it. You mean we have a guest who is not paying? We have three, actually. Percy the prospector, old Samuel who has been here so long, I think he believes he owns the place, and a widow woman named Mrs. Calloway who trades cleaning work for her room. None of them have paid actual money in months. Wilhelmina pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. This is impossible. How am I supposed to pay the debts if we have no income? You could sell, Martha suggested quietly. Cut your losses and go back east. To what? I have nothing there. This hotel is all I have in the world. Wilhelmina straightened her spine, drawing on reserves of stubbornness she had inherited from her father. No, I will find a way to make this work. I have to. She spent the rest of the afternoon taking inventory of the disaster. Of the 12 guest rooms, only 4 were in remotely habitable condition. The dining room's floor was warped and stained. The kitchen had clearly seen better days, though Martha kept it cleaner than the rest of the building. The cellar was damp and smelled of mildew. The tiny office behind the front desk was piled with unpaid bills and unfinished correspondence. As the sun began to set, Wilhelmina made her way to the general store, determined to at least introduce herself to the merchants her uncle had owed. The store was run by a portly man named Clancy who looked at her with barely concealed skepticism when she explained who she was. Edward's niece, eh? Come to settle his accounts, I hope. I intend to, Mr. Clancy, but I must be honest with you. I need time. Give me 60 days to get the hotel running again, and I will pay what is owed. 60 days, he snorted. That is what Edward said 6 months ago. I am out $73, Miss Foster, and I cannot run a charity. I understand, but foreclosing on the hotel helps neither of us. Let me try. Please. Something in her desperation must have moved him because he sighed and nodded. 60 days, but I cannot extend any more credit until the debt is settled. She received similar responses at the butcher, the lumber yard, and the feed store. Everyone was willing to wait, but no one was willing to help. By the time she trudged back to the hotel in the twilight, her feet aching and her spirits crushed, she wanted nothing more than to collapse and cry. Instead, she found a man sitting on the hotel's sagging porch, his boots propped up on the railing and his hat pulled low over his eyes. He appeared to be asleep, his arms crossed over a dusty leather vest. A well-maintained rifle leaned against the wall beside him, and a horse was tied to the hitching post, a handsome bay gelding that looked far better cared for than the hotel. "Excuse me," Wilhelmina said, her voice sharper than she intended. "This hotel is closed." The man pushed his hat back with one finger, revealing a sun-bronzed face with startling blue eyes. He was young, perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a jaw dark with stubble. When he stood, he was tall and lean, moving with an easy grace that suggested strength held in reserve. "That's so. Sign out front says Grand Desert Hotel. Usually means a man can rent a room. The sign is old. We are not taking guests at present." He looked at the building, then back at her, one eyebrow raised. "Lady, no offense, but you look like you could use the money. I am willing to pay for a clean room and a hot meal. Cash in advance." Wilhelmina hesitated. She did need the money desperately, but the rooms were not ready for guests. Still, if she turned away paying customers, how would she ever get the hotel running again? "How long do you need the room?" "A week, maybe 2. I am working on a ranch outside town, but the bunkhouse is full. They said this was the only hotel in Tombstone." "It is. But I must warn you, the accommodations are rough. The hotel has been closed for some time, and we are in the process of reopening." He shrugged. I have slept on the ground more nights than I can count. Long as the bed is softer than dirt and the roof does not leak, I will be satisfied. $2 a night, meals included, $3, she countered, thinking of the debts. And I cannot promise gourmet fare. $3. He pulled a leather wallet from his pocket and counted out bills. 1 week paid in advance, $21. The sight of actual money nearly made her weep. She took it with shaking hands, folding the bills carefully. "Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman, Preston Zimmerman." He stuck out his hand and she shook it, surprised by the calluses on his palm and the strength of his grip. "Though most folks just call me Preston. I am Wilhelmina Foster. I just inherited this hotel from my uncle. My condolences. On your uncle, I mean, and maybe a bit on the hotel too from the look of things." His eyes held a hint of humor that took the sting from the words. "Which room is mine?" She led him inside, acutely aware of how shabby everything looked. Martha had emerged from the kitchen and was staring at Preston with an expression Wilhelmina could not quite read. "Martha, this is Mr. Preston Zimmerman. He will be staying with us for a week. Can you prepare room 4? It is the best of the lot." "Of course, Miss Foster." Martha's voice was strange, almost wary. "Mr. Zimmerman, I will have it ready within the hour." Preston touched his hat brim. "Much obliged, madam. Miss Foster, I do not suppose there is any chance of that hot meal tonight." "There is stew," Martha said, "and bread from this morning. It is not fancy. Sounds like heaven. I will see to my horse and be back directly." He strode out and Martha turned to Wilhelmina with wide eyes. "Do you know who that is?" He said his name is Preston Zimmerman. "Why?" "Because there is another Zimmerman staying here. Percy Zimmerman, the prospector in room 7. That man out there is his younger brother and there is no love lost between them." Wilhelmina's stomach sank. "What do you mean?" "The Zimmerman brothers had a falling out 2 years ago over a mining claim. Percy says Preston cheated him, though I suspect it is more complicated than that. Percy is going to lose his mind when he sees his brother here. Well, he will have to deal with it. We need paying guests, and Preston's money is as good as anyone's." Wilhelmina squared her shoulders. "Now, let us get room 4 ready and pray this does not blow up in our faces." By the time Preston returned from settling his horse at the livery, Martha had worked a minor miracle. Room 4 was not luxurious, but it was clean, with fresh linens on the bed and water in the basin. Wilhelmina showed him up the stairs, uncomfortably aware of how close he walked behind her in the narrow hallway. "This will do fine," he said, setting his saddlebags on the bed. "Thank you, Miss Foster. Dinner will be ready shortly. The dining room is through the front room to the left." She fled before he could respond, her heart beating too fast. There was something unsettling about Preston Zimmerman, though she could not put her finger on what. He had been nothing but polite, yet his presence felt large somehow, as if he took up more space than his physical form required. In the kitchen, Martha was ladling stew into bowls. "I put Percy's dinner in his room. No sense causing trouble tonight. Is he really that bad?" "He is a drunk and a hothead. Always claiming someone cheated him, someone stole from him. The 2 brothers used to be close, or so I heard, but something happened and now they cannot stand the sight of each other." Wilhelmina helped carry the food to the dining room, where Preston was already seated. He had washed up and removed his vest, revealing a clean work shirt that pulled tight across his shoulders. When he looked up and caught her staring, she quickly looked away, busying herself with the water pitcher. "This is good," he said after the first bite. "Better than I have had in a while. Martha is an excellent cook." Wilhelmina sat across from him, suddenly ravenous. She had not eaten since breakfast, and that had been a dry roll and weak coffee at a way station. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Preston spoke again. "So, you inherited this place. You from back east. Philadelphia. I worked as a seamstress there, long way from home. You have experience running a hotel, she bristled at the implied doubt. No, but I am a fast learner, and I have little choice. This hotel is all I have. Did not mean to offend. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. Just making conversation. Truth is, I admire your grit. Takes courage to come out here alone and try to make a go of it. His sincerity disarmed her. Thank you. Though I am not sure courage is the right word, desperation might be more accurate. Sometimes there is not much difference between the two. He smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges. You need help getting this place fixed up. I need a miracle. The list of problems is longer than my arm, and I have no money to hire workers. What if I helped? I am handy with repairs. I could shore up that porch, fix the leaks, do some carpentry work. In exchange, you could knock some off my room rate. Wilhelmina studied him suspiciously. Why would you do that? Because I know what it is like to need a hand up. And because I got nothing but time in the evenings after I finish at the ranch. Might as well make myself useful. It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. But looking at his open, honest face, she found herself wanting to trust him. If you are serious, I would be grateful for the help. God knows I need it. I am serious. We can start tomorrow evening if you like. Make a list of the most urgent repairs. A crash from upstairs made them both jump. Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs, and then Percy Zimmerman appeared in the doorway. He was shorter than Preston and heavier, with a florid face and wild red-rimmed eyes. He pointed a shaking finger at his brother. What the hell are you doing in my hotel? Preston remained seated, his expression calm. Having dinner. I am a paying guest, Percy. You have got some nerve showing up here. This is my place. Mine. You do not own it, Wilhelmina said sharply, rising to her feet. I do. And Mr. Preston Zimmerman has paid for his room, which is more than you have done in months. Percy's attention swung to her, his eyes narrowing. So you are the new owner. Let me give you some advice, lady. Do not trust this snake. He will smile at you while he steals everything you have got. That is enough, Preston said, his voice still quiet but carrying an edge now. Go back to your room, Percy. Sleep it off. Sleep it off. Sleep it off. Percy's voice rose to a shout. You stole my claim. You filed the paperwork while I was laid up sick, and you stole what was rightfully mine. I filed on an abandoned claim. You had been gone for 3 months. The law says that is abandonment. I was sick. I nearly died of fever, and you took advantage. Preston's jaw tightened. You were drinking in Tucson. I saw you there myself, healthy as a horse and betting on cockfights. Do not play the victim, Percy. Percy lunged forward, but Preston was faster. He stood and caught his brother's wrist, stopping the wild swing before it connected. They struggled for a moment, Percy cursing and spitting, Preston's face set in grim determination. Finally, Percy seemed to deflate, sagging in his brother's grip. I hate you, Percy said, his voice breaking. I hate you so much, I know. Preston released him, stepping back. Go to bed, Percy. Percy stumbled from the room, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. A door slammed overhead, rattling the windows. In the silence that followed, Wilhelmina sat down heavily, her appetite gone. I am sorry you had to see that, Preston said, returning to his seat. He did not look at her, his attention focused on his bowl. Martha warned me there was bad blood between you. Is what he said true, about the mining claim? Yes and no. The claim was his originally, but he left it unworked for months. I thought he had given up on it, moved on. When I filed, I did not know he was planning to come back. By the time he showed up, I had already invested time and money into working the claim. The law sided with me, but Percy sees it as betrayal. And were you planning to betray him? Preston finally looked at her, his blue eyes steady. No. I know you have got no reason to believe me, but I would not do that to my brother. We had our differences, but I loved him. I still do, for all the good it does." She believed him. She could not say why, but something in his voice rang true. What happened to the claim turned out to be a bust. "I sold it for less than I put into it. Percy seems to think I made a fortune and am hiding it somewhere, but the truth is we both lost on that deal. The only difference is he can blame me for his failure." Wilhelmina pushed her bowl away. "Family is complicated. That is one word for it." Preston stood, picking up his dishes. "I will help you clean up, then get out of your way. It has been a long day for both of us." They worked in companionable silence, carrying dishes to the kitchen where Martha had already started washing. The older woman gave Preston an appraising look but said nothing. When the work was done, Preston bid them good night and headed upstairs, his footsteps careful and quiet, nothing like Percy's drunken stumbling. "What do you think of him?" Wilhelmina asked Martha when they were alone. "I think he is trouble, but maybe the good kind. God knows we could use some help around here. Just be careful, Miss Foster. Men like that can break your heart without meaning to." That night, Wilhelmina lay in her uncle's old room, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night. Somewhere an owl hooted. The wind rattled the loose shutters. Percy's drunken snoring rumbled through the walls. And once, she heard the creak of floorboards as someone walked past her door, footsteps too light to be Percy's. She wondered if Preston Zimmerman could sleep after the confrontation with his brother. She wondered what it was like to love someone who hated you. And she wondered, with a flutter in her stomach she refused to name, what it would be like to work alongside him in the days to come. When dawn broke, painting the Arizona sky in shades of pink and gold, Wilhelmina rose with determination burning in her chest. She had 60 days to save the hotel, and she could not afford to waste a single one. The next week passed in a blur of hard work. Preston proved true to his word, showing up each evening after his ranch work with tools and energy to spare. He reinforced the sagging porch, replacing rotted boards and straightening the posts. He patched the roof leaks with tar paper and shingles he somehow acquired. He fixed the crooked front desk and repaired 3 broken windows, installing glass he said he got in trade from a friend. Wilhelmina worked alongside him, learning to hammer nails straight and saw boards true. Her hands blistered and her back ached, but she felt more alive than she had in years. There was something satisfying about physical labor, about seeing tangible progress at the end of each day. Martha seemed to thaw toward Preston as she watched him work. She started packing extra food for his lunches and making his favorite desserts. Even old Samuel, the semi-permanent resident who rarely left his room, came down to watch the repairs and offer unsolicited advice. Only Percy remained hostile. He lurked in the shadows, glaring at his brother and muttering threats. Twice more he confronted Preston, and both times Preston deflected him with a patience Wilhelmina found remarkable. She would have lost her temper long ago, but Preston seemed to have an infinite capacity for his brother's abuse. "Why do you let him talk to you that way?" she asked one evening as they worked together to clear out the overgrown garden behind the hotel. Preston paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. The sun was setting, gilding everything in golden light. "Because he is my brother. Because somewhere under all that anger and alcohol is the boy who taught me to ride, who defended me when the bigger kids picked fights, who shared his last piece of bread with me when we were orphaned and starving. I owe him patience. Even when he does not deserve it, especially then." Preston drove his shovel into the hard earth. "Look, I know what people think, that I am a fool for putting up with him, but family is not something you just walk away from, at least not in my book. Maybe I did wrong by him with that mining claim. Maybe I should have waited, tried harder to find him. But I cannot change the past. All I can do is be here now and hope that someday he will forgive me. Wilhelmina pulled a stubborn weed, its roots coming free in a spray of dirt. You are a better person than I am. I am not sure I could be that forgiving. You have not had to be. Maybe if you did, you would surprise yourself. He grinned at her, and her heart did that strange flutter again. Besides, I am not that noble. Half the time I want to punch him right back. They worked until the light failed, then went inside to wash up for dinner. Wilhelmina had started insisting Preston eat with them rather than in his room, partially because it seemed unfriendly to make him eat alone, and partially because she enjoyed his company more than she wanted to admit. Over the past week, they had fallen into an easy camaraderie. He told her stories about working cattle drives and breaking horses. She told him about life in Philadelphia, about the rhythms of the seamstress shop and the gossip of her aunt's social circle. They debated politics and religion, and whether Tombstone would survive once the silver mines played out. They laughed at Martha's dry observations and Samuel's tall tales. And slowly, Wilhelmina felt something shifting inside her, like ice breaking up on a frozen river. She caught herself watching Preston when he worked, admiring the play of muscles in his forearms and the way his hair curled when he got sweaty. She noticed the kindness in his eyes when he talked to Martha, and the gentleness of his hands when he helped an injured bird they found in the garden. She told herself it was gratitude, nothing more. He was helping save her hotel, so naturally she felt fond of him. But late at night, lying in bed and replaying their conversations, she knew it was more than that. She was falling for Preston Zimmerman, and the realization terrified her. On the 8th day, as Preston prepared to pay for his second week, a commotion outside drew them all to the porch. A wagon had pulled up, and 2 men were unloading lumber and supplies. Wilhelmina stared in confusion. "What is this?" One of the men consulted a paper. "Delivery for the Grand Desert Hotel. Lumber, nails, paint, and glass, paid in full." "There must be some mistake. I did not order any of this." "No mistake, madam. Says right here Preston Zimmerman placed the order and paid cash." She turned to Preston, who suddenly looked very interested in the horizon. "Preston, what did you do?" "The hotel needed supplies. I had some money saved. It is not charity," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Consider it an investment. Once you get the place running again, you can pay me back." "Preston, this must have cost $100 or more. I cannot accept this." "You can and you will." His voice was firm. "Wilhelmina, you have been working yourself to exhaustion trying to save this place. Let me help, please." The use of her first name, which he had never done before, made her breath catch. There was something in his eyes, an intensity that had nothing to do with lumber or hotels. Around them, the delivery men waited awkwardly, and Martha was watching from the doorway with a knowing smile. "Fine," Wilhelmina said, her voice not quite steady, "but I am paying you back. Every penny. I am counting on it." He turned to the delivery men. "Let us get this unloaded." They spent the rest of the day organizing the supplies and planning the work ahead. With proper materials, they could repair the damaged rooms, repaint the exterior, and replace the broken furniture. The hotel was starting to look less like a lost cause and more like a real possibility. That evening, as they sat on the newly reinforced porch watching the stars emerge, Preston said quietly, "I should tell you something. My work at the ranch ends next week. They were only hiring temporary help for the roundup." Wilhelmina's stomach dropped. "Oh. I suppose you will be moving on then." "I was thinking I might stay in Tombstone for a while. If the hotel has a place for me, that is. I could work as handyman and general help in exchange for room and board. Once you start getting paying guests, We could negotiate wages. Hope flared in her chest. You would do that, I would. He turned to look at her, and in the starlight his eyes were dark and unreadable. Truth is, I have been drifting for a long time, ranch to ranch, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. I am tired of drifting, Wilhelmina. I am ready to put down roots somewhere, and I think maybe this is the place. Because of the hotel. Her voice came out as a whisper, because of you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Wilhelmina's heart hammered against her ribs. She should say something, but her mind had gone blank. Preston stood, and for a moment she thought he would leave, but instead he held out his hand. Walk with me. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They walked in silence through the quiet streets of Tombstone, past the darkened storefronts and saloons still glowing with lamplight and noise. The night air was cooling, a relief after the day's heat. I need to tell you something, Preston said finally. About Percy and the mining claim. You deserve to know the whole truth. You do not owe me explanations. Maybe not, but I want to give them anyway. He took a breath. Percy and I, we grew up rough. Our parents died when I was 8 and he was 13. We got split up, sent to different families, but Percy ran away and came to find me. We survived together, doing whatever work we could find. He raised me, really, kept me fed and out of trouble, made sure I got some schooling. They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open desert. Preston leaned against a fence post, his eyes distant with memory. When we were old enough, we started working claims together. Had a few good strikes, a lot of bust. Then 3 years ago, Percy started drinking heavy. I do not know what triggered it, but he just gave up. Started spending all our money on whiskey and women, gambling it away, picking fights. I tried to pull him out of it, but he just got worse. That must have been hard. It was hell. I loved my brother, but I was watching him destroy himself and drag me down with him. So when he took off and left our claim abandoned, I thought maybe it was a blessing, a chance for both of us to start fresh. I filed on it legally, worked it for months, but it turned out to be worthless. By the time Percy came back, sober and sorry, the damage was done. He convinced himself I had betrayed him, stolen a fortune. Nothing I say makes any difference. He is lost in his own bitterness. Yeah, Preston turned to look at her. I am telling you this because I need you to understand. My family is complicated and painful. My brother hates me, and that is probably not going to change. If we... He trailed off, then started again. If there is something between us, you need to know what you are getting into. Wilhelmina stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Preston Zimmerman, are you trying to court me? Even in the darkness, she could see his lips curve into a smile. I suppose I am, if you are willing to be courted. I think I might be. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Though I should warn you, I have no experience with this. I was always the practical one, the girl who put duty before romance. I never expected to feel this. And what is this? He reached up, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and she shivered despite the warm night. I do not know yet, but I would like to find out. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and careful, as if she were something precious that might break. She rose on her toes, reaching up to rest her hands on his shoulders, kissing him back with all the longing she had been trying to deny. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I have been wanting to do that for days, he admitted. Only days. I have been thinking about it since the night you arrived. His laugh was warm and delighted. Is that so? And here I thought you found me annoying. I did. You are far too charming for your own good, and you have a maddening habit of being right about everything. I will try to be wrong more often. Please do not. I find I rather like you the way you are. They walked back to the hotel hand in hand, and when they reached the porch, Preston kissed her again, longer this time, deeper. When he finally pulled away, his breathing was ragged. "I should let you get some rest. We have a lot of work ahead of us tomorrow. Preston, thank you for everything, for believing in me and the hotel, for staying. No place I would rather be." He kissed her forehead and headed inside, leaving Wilhelmina standing on the porch with her fingers pressed to her lips and her heart soaring. She had come to Tombstone expecting to salvage a failing hotel. She had not expected to find love in the process. The next month was the hardest and happiest of Wilhelmina's life. She and Preston worked dawn to dusk, transforming the hotel room by room. They repainted the exterior a fresh white with dark green trim. They repaired and refinished all the furniture. They scrubbed and polished until everything gleamed. Martha watched their growing romance with maternal approval, occasionally shooing them outside when their lingering glances became too distracting. Percy remained a dark cloud on the horizon. His drinking worsened, and twice Wilhelmina had to physically prevent him from attacking Preston. She threatened to evict him, but Preston talked her out of it, saying his brother had nowhere else to go. It was that compassion, that refusal to abandon Percy even when he deserved it, that made Wilhelmina fall deeper in love with Preston. They stole moments together when they could. Quiet conversations on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. A picnic lunch in the desert where Preston taught her to shoot his rifle. A dance in the empty dining room to music only they could hear, Preston humming while he twirled her around the polished floor. "I love you," he said one night, the words sudden and fierce. They were working late, hanging new curtains in the guest rooms. Wilhelmina nearly dropped the curtain rod. "What? I love you, Wilhelmina Foster. I know it is fast, and maybe I should wait longer to say it, but I do not want to wait. I love you. I love your stubbornness, and your work ethic, and the way you refuse to give up even when everything seems impossible. I love how kind you are to Martha, and how patient you are with Percy despite everything. I love the way you look in the morning with your hair all messy, and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I just love you." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I love you too. I think I started falling for you the first night when you offered to help, and I have been falling ever since. I love you, Preston." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her knees weak. They stumbled against the wall, the curtain rod falling forgotten to the floor. His hands tangled in her hair and she pressed closer, wanting to crawl inside his skin. "Marry me," he said between kisses. "I know it is crazy and fast, but marry me anyway. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you here in this hotel in this town. Say yes." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." They made love that night for the first time in the big bed in the room that had once been her uncle's and was now hers. Preston was tender and patient, taking his time despite her inexperience. When it was over, she lay in his arms feeling complete in a way she had never imagined possible. "No regrets?" he asked, stroking her hair. "None. You? Only that I did not meet you sooner." They were married 2 weeks later by the circuit judge, with Martha and Samuel as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony in the hotel's dining room, which they had transformed into a beautiful space with fresh flowers and candles. Wilhelmina wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Preston bought her as a wedding gift, pale blue silk that shimmered in the candlelight. Percy was notably absent, locked in his room with a bottle. Wilhelmina tried not to let it hurt, but Preston's pain was visible in the tightness around his eyes. When the judge pronounced them man and wife, Preston kissed her deeply, and for a moment nothing else mattered. The hotel officially reopened the next day with an advertisement in the Tombstone Epitaph newspaper. By the end of the week, they had 3 paying guests. By the end of the month, they were full, with people being turned away. Word spread that the Grand Desert Hotel was under new management and worth visiting. The rooms were clean, the food was excellent, and the proprietors were friendly and welcoming. Money started coming in, and Wilhelmina began paying down the debts. Clancy at the general store was the first to be paid in full, and his surprise and delight made her feel like she had won a victory. One by one, she settled the accounts, watching the crushing weight of debt slowly lift. The bank was satisfied with her progress and agreed to restructure the mortgage payments. The hotel had gone from a failing disaster to a thriving business in just under 3 months, and Wilhelmina knew she could never have done it without Preston. Life was not perfect. Percy's drinking continued to worsen, and one terrible night he started a fire in his room, passing out drunk with a lit cigarette. Preston and Wilhelmina smelled the smoke and managed to put it out before it spread, but it was a wake-up call. The next morning, Preston sat with his brother and delivered an ultimatum. "You get sober or you leave. Those are your choices, Percy. I love you, but I will not watch you kill yourself or put my wife and her business at risk." "You chose her over me," Percy spat. "Your own blood, and you chose some woman you barely know." "I chose life over death. I am asking you to do the same. There is a doctor in Tucson who helps people with drinking problems. Let me take you there. Let me help you." For a long moment, Percy just stared at his brother with bloodshot eyes. Then, to everyone's shock, he started to cry, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. Preston pulled him into a hug, and Percy clung to him like a drowning man to a life raft. "I am so sorry," Percy gasped. "I am so sorry, Preston. You did not deserve any of this. I was wrong. I was drunk and bitter and wrong." "I know. It is okay. We are going to get you help." Preston took Percy to Tucson the next day, staying with him for a week while he went through the worst of the withdrawal. When they returned, Percy was sober and broken and humble. He apologized to Wilhelmina with tears streaming down his face, promising to pay back every cent of his back rent. "You can work it off," she told him. "We need help in the stables and with maintenance. If you are serious about staying sober, you can stay and work for your room and board until you get on your feet." Percy proved true to his word. He stayed sober, attended meetings with other recovering drunks in town, and worked hard around the hotel. The relationship between the brothers was still fragile, still healing, but it was healing. Wilhelmina watched them slowly rebuild their bond and felt grateful to be part of it. As autumn arrived and the desert heat began to ease, Wilhelmina realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first she attributed it to stress, but when 2 months passed with no sign, she knew. Martha confirmed her suspicions with a knowing smile. "I had wondered when you would figure it out. You have been looking peaked in the mornings. I am going to have a baby." The words felt unreal. "Preston and I are going to have a baby." "What are you going to name the little one? Have you thought about it?" "Not yet. I just realized myself." She told Preston that evening as they walked through the garden they had planted together. He stopped dead, his face blank with shock. Then a grin split his face, so wide and joyful it made her heart squeeze. "A baby. We are having a baby. We are. Are you happy?" "Happy? Wilhelmina, I am over the moon. I am terrified and thrilled and completely in love with you." He picked her up and spun her around, then set her down carefully as if she might break. "We are having a baby." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Wilhelmina continued working at the hotel until her 7th month when Preston and Martha ganged up on her and insisted she rest more. The hotel was thriving now, profitable enough that they had hired 2 additional staff members. Percy had moved into the small house behind the hotel, paying rent and maintaining his sobriety with grim determination. In March of 1883, Wilhelmina gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Edward, after her uncle who had inadvertently brought them together. He had Preston's blue eyes and Wilhelmina's dark hair, and both parents agreed he was the most perfect child ever born. Percy was a doting uncle, sober 9 months and counting. He held baby Edward with trembling hands and tears in his eyes, whispering promises to be better, do better. The sight of the two brothers together, Preston's arm around Percy's shoulders as they looked at the baby, made Wilhelmina cry happy tears. The hotel continued to prosper. They added a small restaurant that became popular with locals, not just travelers. They hired a pianist who played in the evenings, bringing music and life to the space. Wilhelmina's aunt came to visit from Philadelphia, shocked to find her practical niece thriving in the Wild West with a cowboy husband and a beautiful baby. "You look happy," her aunt said, watching Wilhelmina and Preston together. "Truly happy." "I am. I never expected this life, but I cannot imagine any other now." As the years passed, the Zimmerman family grew. A daughter, Caroline, was born in 1885, followed by another son, Thomas, in 1887. The hotel expanded to include a second building with more rooms. Percy married a widow who had stayed at the hotel, a kind woman named Sarah who had lost her husband to a mining accident. Together, they opened a livery stable that partnered with the hotel. Preston remained the steadiest, most loving partner Wilhelmina could have imagined. They still worked side by side, though these days they had managers and staff to handle most of the daily operations. He surprised her with flowers and poetry, taught their children to ride, and still made her heart race when he pulled her into dark corners for stolen kisses. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on the porch of the hotel, watching the sun set over Tombstone. The town had survived the decline of the silver mines, reinventing itself as a regional hub. The Grand Desert Hotel was now the finest establishment in the territory, known far and wide for its hospitality and charm. "You ever regret it?" Preston asked, his arm around her waist. "Staying here instead of going back to Philadelphia?" "Never. Not for a single moment." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "My uncle gave me more than a hotel. He gave me a new life, a chance to become someone I never knew I could be, and that brought me to you. I am the lucky one." A drifting cowboy who stumbled into the best thing that ever happened to him. He kissed her temple. "I love you, Wilhelmina Zimmerman." "I love you too, Preston. Always." Inside, their children were laughing, playing some game that involved much running and shrieking. Martha was singing in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Percy and Sarah were due to arrive any moment with their new baby daughter. The hotel was full of guests, the restaurant was serving its last customers of the evening, and the piano music drifted out through the open windows. It was a full, loud, chaotic, beautiful life. Wilhelmina had inherited a broken hotel and every problem that came with it. But she had also found love, family, purpose, and a home she had never expected. And looking around at everything they had built together, she knew she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. The desert night settled over Tombstone, stars emerging in the vast Arizona sky. The Grand Desert Hotel glowed with warmth and welcome, a beacon of home and hope in the wilderness. And inside, Preston and Wilhelmina Zimmerman held each other close, grateful for the inheritance that had changed everything, for the problems that had brought them together, and for the love that had made it all worthwhile. Years continued to roll by, each one adding new stories and memories to the tapestry of their life. By 1895, the Grand Desert Hotel had become something of a legend in Arizona territory. Travelers made it a point to stay there, attracted by the stories of the determined Eastern woman and the cowboy, who had transformed a dilapidated building into a thriving business. Travel writers mentioned it in their articles, and photographers came to capture its distinctive facade and charming interior. Edward, now 12, had his father's way with people and his mother's head for business. He already talked about taking over the hotel someday, making plans to expand further and perhaps start a chain of hotels across the territory. Caroline, at 10, was a spirited girl who loved horses more than anything and spent most of her free time at Uncle Percy's livery. Thomas, at 8, was the scholar of the family, always with his nose in a book, dreaming of becoming a lawyer or a teacher. The children were being raised with the story of how their parents met, how a crumbling hotel and a list of problems had brought together two people who seemed destined for very different lives. They knew every detail of the early struggles, the repairs, the debt, and most importantly, the love that had bloomed in the midst of chaos. Preston had aged gracefully, his dark hair now streaked with silver at the temples. The years of hard work showed in the lines around his eyes, but those same eyes still sparkled with love every time he looked at Wilhelmina. He remained active in the hotel's operations, though he had delegated much of the daily management to trusted employees. His true passion had become the garden, which he had expanded into a lush oasis that provided vegetables for the restaurant and flowers for the rooms. Wilhelmina, at 36, had grown into her role as proprietress with natural authority. The shy, uncertain seamstress from Philadelphia was long gone, replaced by a confident businesswoman who commanded respect throughout Tombstone. She served on the town council, advocated for better schools, and had become a mentor to other women trying to establish themselves in business. Yet she never forgot the terror and desperation of those first days, and she made it a policy to give people second chances, just as the town had given her a chance. Percy's transformation remained one of the most remarkable aspects of their story. He had been sober for 12 years now, a living testament to the power of family and forgiveness. His livery stable had become as successful as the hotel, and he had trained several young men in the business. He and Sarah had 3 children of their own, and the two families were inseparable. The brothers who had once been consumed by bitterness and anger now worked side by side, their bond stronger for having been broken and repaired. Martha had retired from full-time work, but still lived in a small apartment attached to the hotel. She spent her days spoiling the Zimmerman children and teaching the new cook her recipes. At 63, she claimed to have seen it all, but she never tired of telling anyone who would listen about the day young Miss Foster arrived from Philadelphia and set about saving a doomed hotel with nothing but determination and grit. One warm evening in September, Preston found Wilhelmina in the hotel office, poring over the ledgers. Even after all these years, she insisted on personally reviewing the accounts each week. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her work, still marveling that this incredible woman had chosen him. "The books can wait," he said. "Come watch the sunset with me." She looked up, reading glasses perched on her nose, and smiled. "You are a terrible influence, always distracting me from my work." "That is my job as your husband. Now come on, or we will miss the best part." They walked hand in hand to their favorite spot, a small hill behind the hotel that overlooked the town. From here, they could see the Grand Desert Hotel in its full glory, white walls glowing in the evening light, the restaurant bustling with diners, the newly installed electric lights beginning to flicker on as darkness approached. You remember what this place looked like when you first saw it?" Preston asked, like a lost cause. "I stood in that street thinking my uncle had cursed me." She laughed at the memory. "I had $32 to my name and $500 in debt. I wanted to cry. Instead, you rolled up your sleeves and got to work. That is what I fell in love with first, you know, your courage. And here I thought it was my devastating beauty," she teased. "That too," he admitted, pulling her close. "But beauty fades. Courage endures. Your courage saved the hotel, saved me, saved Percy. It built everything we have." "Our courage," she corrected. "You chose to stay when you could have moved on. You invested your savings when you had no reason to trust that I would succeed. You believed in me before I believed in myself. We were a team from the start. We just did not know it yet." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. Below, Tombstone was coming alive with evening activity. Saloons were filling up, stores were closing for the night, families were settling in for dinner. The town had survived its boom and bust cycle, finding a sustainable rhythm. It would never be as wild as it was in the early '80s, but it was home to thousands of people building ordinary, extraordinary lives. "Preston, I have been thinking about something," Wilhelmina said slowly. "Edward is going to need serious training if he is to take over the hotel someday. I was wondering if we should send him east for a few years, let him study business and hotel management in a proper school." Preston considered this. "You would trust him away from home. He is only 12. "I know, and the thought terrifies me, but we cannot keep him small forever. He has ambitions beyond what Tombstone can teach him, and we can afford to give him opportunities neither of us had. You are right, as usual, though I am not ready to admit our son is growing up." He sighed. "What about Caroline and Thomas? Do they go east too? Caroline wants to train horses professionally. I was thinking we could send her to California, to that ranch that specializes in breeding and training. And Thomas should definitely go to university when he is old enough. He is too bright to waste on ranching or hotel keeping. Listen to us, planning to send all our babies away." Preston's voice was thick with emotion. "When did we get old enough to have children making life decisions? We are not old. We are just experienced." She turned in his arms to face him. "But I do not want to talk about the children right now. I want to talk about us. When was the last time we took a real trip, just the two of us? 1889, when we went to San Francisco for our anniversary. That was 6 years ago. We should go somewhere. Martha can handle the hotel and Percy can watch the children. Let us be young and foolish again, even if just for a few weeks." Preston's face lit up. "I know exactly where we should go. Back to Philadelphia. I want to see where you came from, meet the people who knew you before. I want to walk the streets you walked and understand what you left behind to come here." The idea appealed to her more than she expected. "I have not been back since I left. I wonder how much has changed. Then let us find out. We will make it a second honeymoon, explore the city, eat fancy food, stay in elegant hotels and judge them against ours." "Ours will be better," she said confidently, and he laughed. They planned the trip for November, after the busy autumn season ended. Martha was thrilled to take over operations, insisting she was not too old to run a hotel. The children reacted with mixed emotions. Edward and Thomas excited about the independence, Caroline pouty about being left behind. Percy and Sarah promised to keep close watch on all three. The train journey east was an adventure in itself. Wilhelmina had forgotten the vastness of the country, the way landscapes changed from desert to prairie to forest to cities. Preston pressed his face to the window like a child, marveling at everything. He had never been east of Colorado, and the idea of Philadelphia seemed as exotic to him as Arizona had once seemed to Wilhelmina. Philadelphia in November was cold and gray, a shock after the perpetual sunshine of Arizona. Wilhelmina bundled into a wool coat she had not worn in years, suddenly feeling like a stranger in her own hometown. The streets were familiar but different, narrower than she remembered, crowded with people and noise and activity that overwhelmed her after the quieter pace of Tombstone. They stayed at the finest hotel in the city, and Wilhelmina spent the first hour pointing out every flaw and deficiency compared to the Grand Desert. Preston finally had to kiss her to make her stop talking about thread counts and service quality. "We are here to relax, remember. Not to critique the competition." She visited her aunt, now elderly and frail but still sharp-tongued. The old woman looked Preston up and down critically. "So this is the cowboy who stole my niece. I suppose he will do. You have treated her well." "I have tried my best, madam. She makes it easy." Wilhelmina always was too practical for her own good. "I worried she would never marry, too busy being sensible. I am glad she found someone who made her foolish enough to take a chance." They visited the seamstress shop where Wilhelmina had worked, now run by her cousin. The small, cramped workspace made her claustrophobic after the spacious hotel. Had she really spent years here, bent over needle and thread, dreaming of nothing beyond the next order? "I cannot believe I was happy here," she told Preston as they walked through the city that evening. "It seems like such a small life now." "Not small, just different. You needed to be here to become the person who could handle Tombstone. Everything that came before prepared you for everything that came after." They attended the theater, ate at expensive restaurants, shopped in grand department stores, and explored museums. It was exciting and exhausting, and by the end of 2 weeks, both were desperately homesick for Arizona. "I thought I might regret leaving," Wilhelmina admitted as they boarded the train west. "I thought I might see Philadelphia and wish I had stayed, but being here just made me realize how much I love my life in Tombstone. I miss the heat and the dust and the wide open sky. I miss our hotel and our children and even the crazy chaos of daily operations." "We are going home," Preston said, squeezing her hand. "Back where we belong." The return journey felt faster, their anticipation building with each passing mile. When the train finally pulled into Tombstone Station on a bright December afternoon, the children were waiting on the platform, jumping and waving. Wilhelmina barely waited for the train to stop before climbing down and gathering them into her arms. "I missed you so much," she said, kissing each face repeatedly. "Were you good for Uncle Percy and Aunt Sarah?" "Mostly," Edward said with a grin. "Thomas got in trouble at school for correcting the teacher, and Caroline tried to ride that wild horse that was brought into the livery." "Did not try, did ride," Caroline corrected proudly. "Uncle Percy said I was a natural." Preston scooped up Thomas. "And what did you correct the teacher about? She said Arizona would never become a state." "But I read that there is a movement in Congress, and we might get statehood within 10 years. She should stay current with political developments." "That is my boy," Preston said, trying not to laugh, "always defending Arizona's honor." They returned to the hotel to find it running smoothly in their absence. Martha had handled everything perfectly, and if anything, seemed reluctant to relinquish control. That evening, the whole extended family gathered for dinner in the restaurant. Percy and Sarah with their children, Martha. Even old Samuel, who was now truly ancient but still insisted on living in room 3. Looking around the table at these people who had become her family, Wilhelmina felt overwhelming gratitude. She had left Philadelphia alone and uncertain, and somehow she had found this, a full, rich life surrounded by people she loved. Preston caught her eye across the table and winked, understanding her mood without words. That was the magic of their marriage, she thought. They had learned each other so thoroughly that they could communicate in glances and gestures. He knew her fears and dreams, her strengths and weaknesses. And she knew his, the tender heart beneath the tough cowboy exterior, the loyalty that ran bone deep, the capacity for forgiveness that humbled her. After dinner, after the children were in bed and the guests had retired to their rooms, Preston and Wilhelmina walked through the hotel together. It had become a ritual over the years, this nightly inspection that was part practical and part sentimental. They checked that doors were locked and lamps were extinguished, but mostly they just walked through the space they had built together, remembering. "This is where we hung the first new curtains," Wilhelmina said, touching the fabric in the dining room. "You told me you loved me for the first time." "This is where I first saw you," Preston said, standing at the front desk. "You looked so determined and so scared. I wanted to help you even before I knew your name." They climbed the stairs to the second floor, walking past the guest rooms, each one holding memories of repairs and renovations and small victories. At the end of the hall was their private suite, expanded over the years to include a sitting room and a nursery that now housed Thomas. In their bedroom, Preston pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. "You know what I am most grateful for? It is not the success of the hotel or the money or the respect we have earned in town. It is this, us. Getting to love you every day is the greatest privilege of my life. You have always had a way with words," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "But I feel the same. I love you more now than the day we married, and I did not think that was possible. You are my partner, my best friend, my home." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew their own. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Wilhelmina thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Philadelphia to Tombstone, from frightened seamstress to confident hotel owner, from lonely spinster to beloved wife and mother. It had all started with an inheritance and a list of overwhelming problems, and it had been solved by a cowboy with kind eyes and capable hands, who had seen past her desperation to the strength underneath, who had stayed when he could have left, who had invested everything in a dream that was not his own, who had loved her when she did not know she was worthy of love. The years continued to pass with remarkable swiftness. Edward went east to study at a prestigious hotel management school in New York, writing home with detailed letters about modern business practices and innovations they should implement. Caroline followed her passion to California, apprenticing with a renowned horse trainer and winning awards for her skills. Thomas earned a scholarship to university, where he studied law with the intention of returning to Arizona to help guide it toward statehood. Preston and Wilhelmina adjusted to the empty nest, finding new rhythms as a couple. They traveled more, visiting their children and exploring new places. But they always returned to Tombstone and the Grand Desert Hotel, which remained the center of their world. The hotel continued to thrive under their management, adapting to changing times while maintaining the warmth and personal touch that had always defined it. In 1902, now in their early 40s, they stood once again on the porch of the hotel, this time watching their grandchildren play in the street. Edward had married and brought his wife to help run the hotel, giving Preston and Wilhelmina their first grandchild. Percy and Sarah's oldest daughter had also married and had children. The family was growing in beautiful, chaotic ways. "We did it," Preston said quietly. "Built something that lasts." "We did," Wilhelmina agreed. "Though I could never have imagined all of this that first day when I stood in this very spot and wanted to cry. What would you tell that frightened girl from Philadelphia if you could talk to her? Wilhelmina considered the question seriously. "I would tell her to trust herself, to believe that she is stronger than she knows, that the problems that seem insurmountable are actually opportunities in disguise, and that the tired cowboy who offers to help with repairs is going to change her entire life in the best possible way." "That cowboy was just looking for a place to sleep," Preston said with a smile. "He had no idea he was about to meet the love of his life." "Divine providence," Martha said from behind them, making them both jump. The old woman was using a cane now, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "God brought you two together for a reason. This hotel was dying and you both needed saving in your own ways. You saved each other." "I suppose we did," Wilhelmina said, leaning into Preston's embrace. "Saved each other and built a family and a business and a legacy." "Not bad for a seamstress and a drifter." Martha patted her arm. "Not bad at all, dear girl. Not bad at all." As the sun set over Tombstone one more time, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the Grand Desert Hotel stood solid and welcoming, lights glowing in every window. Inside, 3 generations of family laughed and loved and lived. Outside, the desert stretched away into infinity, vast and beautiful and eternal. Wilhelmina Foster Zimmerman had inherited a broken hotel and every problem that came with it. But with the help of one cowboy who had seen beyond the problems to the possibilities, she had built something extraordinary. Not just a successful business, but a home. Not just a marriage, but a partnership that had weathered every storm. Not just a family, but a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. And that, she thought, was the greatest inheritance of all. Not what had been given to her, but what they had created together. Love, family, purpose, and a place where people could come and feel welcomed, where weary travelers could rest and know they were home. The Grand Desert Hotel was more than wood and paint and furniture. It was a testament to what was possible when two people chose to face problems together, to believe in each other, and to never give up. Preston kissed the top of her head, and she closed her eyes, memorizing this moment. The warmth of his body against hers, the sounds of their family inside, the smell of Martha's cooking drifting through the open windows. This was happiness. This was home. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied. "Always and forever." And in that perfect moment, with the past behind them and the future stretching bright with promise, Wilhelmina knew that every problem, every struggle, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because all of it, every single step of the journey had led her here. To this man, this place, this life. She had inherited a hotel and found a home. She had faced impossible problems and discovered her own strength. And most importantly, she had found love with a cowboy who had helped fix not just the building, but her heart, her dreams, and her entire world. The story that had begun with dust and debt and desperation had transformed into something beautiful. And as the stars began to emerge in the endless Arizona sky, the Grand Desert Hotel stood as proof that sometimes the biggest problems lead to the greatest blessings, and that love, once found, can overcome anything. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a journey ended where it began but transformed by the traveling. The hotel that had brought them together would pass to their children and grandchildren, carrying forward the legacy of determination, hard work, and enduring love. And in the history of Tombstone, Arizona, the story of Wilhelmina and Preston Zimmerman would be told for generations. A reminder that sometimes all it takes is courage, faith, and one person willing to help fix all the problems that seem too big to solve alone.